There are a lot of great characters in Tolkien's Silmarillion, but if there was one character on whom the rest of the story relies, one pivot point that created Middle-earth as we know it, it would be Feanor. Despite living a relatively short life, Feanor hammered his name into the pages of history, making decisions both beautiful and bad that would resonate through the rest of time. But despite the action, rage, and drama that are part of Feanor's tale, I would actually categorize his life as more of a tragedy than anything. And it's a unique form of tragedy, one where we don't just see the cataclysmic downfall of a great man, but we also get to watch that man become the person who he was. We get to watch Feanor's story from its very inception, the wounds that were left to fester, the mistakes and decisions made, the layers of hurt and pride that shaped one of Tolkien's most triumphant and glorious characters, and one of his most catastrophic failures. As one of the great tragic characters in Tolkien's legendarium, Feanor encapsulates Tolkien's greatest desires and fears, to serve as one of Tolkien's most profound warnings. And speaking of dire warnings, you better get yourself ready to hear about this video's sponsor, ZocDoc. We're getting to that special time of year where everyone is a little bit sick all the time, and I tell you what, I am not looking forward to it. I always end up looking up my symptoms and panicking because I would rather do that than try and get on a phone call with a doctor, make an awkward appointment time, and deal with my insurance. Whether it's a runny nose, a cough that just won't go away, or those stress hives you break into when you think about traveling for the holidays, you could grin and bear it, or you could get yourself some actual help using this video's sponsor, ZocDoc. With ZocDoc, I was able to find a doctor, make an appointment, and finally get that checked off my to-do list. ZocDoc is a free website where you can search and compare high-quality, in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. And ZocDoc isn't just for one type of care. They have more than 100,000 providers across nearly every specialty. From primary care to dental health, eye care to urgent care, and mental health, and more, it is a one-stop shop for all of your healthcare needs. And there's no need to call a doctor's office and wait on hold either. ZocDoc allows you to do everything online. With ZocDoc, you can filter by insurance, location, and specialties, and see reviews by actual verified patients, so that you can get the best, most convenient care for you. And when you've found the doctor you need, you can see their actual appointment openings. ZocDoc helps you get appointments fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking, and you can score same-day appointments. So stop waiting around and guessing like I have, and start getting yourself the care that you need. Just go to ZocDoc.com/JessOfTheShire to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That is ZocDoc.com/JessOfTheShire to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. Thank you so much to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video, and thanks to all of you for checking out my sponsors. Feanor was born in the Years of the Trees, the eldest son of the elf king Finwë. Finwë was a Noldor, the group of elves known as the most noble and most skillful, and his firstborn was the epitome of Noldoran power. His birth name was Finwë, a name derived from tacking the elvish word for skilled onto his father's name, but it was his mother that called him Feanor, which means Spirit of Fire. And this name was indeed fitting, because Feanor was so alive, so filled with this burning spirit, that he burnt his mother out entirely. She poured into him everything within her, every child that she may have had, their spirit, their liveliness, even her own spirit went into her son. And after he was born, she became the first elf to ever seek out death. Death was never meant to be a part of the elves' immortal existence. Their spirits were always intended to be re-embodied every time they had to depart, but Feanor's mother slipped into a coma from which she refused to wake. Finwë was devastated by the loss of his wife, and although he waited for her some time, hoping that she might one day return, it became clear that she would never wake again, and so he dedicated himself to being the best father possible. He raised Feanor to be a strong, bold child, immensely skilled and terribly independent, but Finwë had always wanted more than one son. He came before the Valar and pleaded that they might allow him to fall in love and marry again. The Valar recommended against this. It was against elf nature to do such a thing, but they did grant Finwë permission. And so, after some time passed, he took a new wife with whom he had 2 more sons. While Finwë was ecstatic, and his new sons Fingolfin and Finarfin were nearly as noble as their older brother, Feanor wallowed in his displeasure. He never liked that his father had remarried, he refused to get close to his half-brothers, and it has been supposed that this early root of resentment was one of the things that put Feanor's feet on the dark path that he would follow. He refused to live with his half-brothers, instead choosing to work alone, becoming the greatest craftsman that Arda had ever seen. Feanor grew swiftly, as if a secret fire were kindled in him. He was tall and fair of face and masterful, his eyes piercingly bright and his hair raven dark, in the pursuit of all his purposes eager and steadfast. Few ever changed his course by counsel, none by force. He became of all the Noldor, then or after, the most subtle in mind and the most skilled in hand. There are a few very important things to note in this passage. One is Tolkien's use of the term the secret fire. Tolkien was always very intentional in his use of words and names, and this idea of the secret fire only occurs 2 times in the entire Silmarillion, once in the creation of the known universe, and once to describe Feanor. The secret fire, sometimes called the flame imperishable, is the spirit of creation that belongs to Ilúvatar, the creator, alone. It is this fire that the Dark Lord Melkor so lusted after. This is what pulled him away from the light, a desire to create truly original and living things. So it is not a simple thing that Feanor is described as seeming to contain this secret fire. There is something of the creator's breath, the creator's will in him, but it is also tinged with the fall, the great fall of Melkor, which predicated the presence of all evil in Arda. There is in Feanor this capacity for great power, for beauty, for creation, and also a penchant for destruction. There is also, in this description, a hint towards Feanor's legendary stubbornness. Few ever changed his courses by counsel, none by force. Feanor was not somebody who worked well in group projects. He didn't want teamwork or discussion. He made up his mind and he was driven to fulfill the things of his will, and that only became more of a drive when he felt like someone was trying to force him into doing something that he did not want. His strength of will was a beautiful and brave thing, something that made him the elf that he was, so powerful and bold, but it could also be a hindrance. There simply seemed to be too much of everything in Feanor, an overabundance of good traits that in their boiling over almost inevitably resulted in harm. Feanor fits very well into Tolkien's archetype of overzealous makers. It was a desire to make things independently that first pulled Melkor from the light. The Valar Aule was a blacksmith who nearly lost favor with Ilúvatar due to his obsession with creating the dwarves. Saruman's desire for industrialization brought on his destruction. Arda's history is studded with these characters who want so desperately to make things that it destroys them. This is all a part of Tolkien's larger philosophy around the idea of subcreation. He firmly believed that we make by the law in which we are made. He was a Catholic, and he thought that the world was made by a maker, by God. And if mankind was then made in the image of that God, it would make sense that there was something of this creative spirit, this will to make things out of nothing, within each and every one of us. Tolkien believed that this heritage was the root of his own creative energy, and he channeled that into the art of sub-creation, making his own worlds within and inspired by the beautiful world around him. So it is that in Tolkien's Christian-inspired Middle-earth theology, people were also made in the image of a maker, and thus want to create. But it is very, very important that these makers remember that they are not creators, but sub-creators, operating within the sandbox that the great creator made for them. Because if they overstep those bounds, they risk their own creations damning them. And we can see that Tolkien was pulling this thread from many older stories. It was the Norse gods' creation of time and space that subjected them to time and thus to defeat at Ragnarok. Prometheus's choice to bring fire to man earned him eternal torture, and Dr. Frankenstein's monster became the agent of his own defeat. So it was that Feanor's intense creative power created his own demise. Feanor mastered all sorts of skills, but he was particularly talented at the creation of gems, precious stones far more beautiful than anything that nature could create. And his years of ceaseless solitary work came to their peak in the creation of the Silmarils. These gems were a masterwork, an ode to the peace and beauty of the world that Feanor had flourished in, designed to capture the light of the two trees of Valinor, Telperion and Laurelin, the living sun and moon that illuminated all of the world in dreamy harmony. The artful encasement of the Silmarils is described. Like the crystal of diamonds, it appeared, and yet was more strong than adamant, so that no violence could mar it or break it within the kingdom of Arda. Yet that crystal was to the Silmarils, but as is the body to the children of Ilúvatar, the house of its inner fire that is within it, and yet in all parts of it, and is its life. And the inner fire of the Silmarils Feanor made of the blended light of the trees of Valinor, which lives in them yet, though the trees have long withered and shine no more. Therefore, even in the darkness of the deepest treasury, the Silmarils of their own radiance shone like the stars of Varda, and yet, as were they indeed living things, they rejoiced in light and received it, and gave it back in hues more marvelous than before. All were in complete awe of this creation, and the Valar themselves placed a special blessing on the Silmarils, that no evil or wicked hand may touch them, lest that hand be withered and burnt. The Silmarils were perfect, and perhaps that's where the problem lay. Feanor, just like Tolkien and so many other makers, was a bit of a perfectionist. His entire life was bent on making better, more beautiful, more powerful things. Nothing was ever quite good enough. There was always room for growth and for improvement. And we see the way that this played out in Tolkien's own life. He was such a perfectionist. He wanted so much for his works to be the best version that they could possibly be, that there are pages and pages of unpublished material from him, things that he was still working on through his entire life. There were so many beautiful gems left incomplete due to Tolkien's ruthless pursuit of perfection. But in spite of this lifelong pursuit, I do think that there was a part of Tolkien that understood that true perfection was never really possible. In his short story Leaf by Niggle, Tolkien writes somewhat allegorically of a painter who is desperate to finish a painting of a tree, his life's masterpiece. But the painter finds himself constantly interrupted by life, by annoying neighbors, by rainy days, by long bike rides to do chores, and he is never able to finish his masterpiece. The painter dies, and it would seem that all is lost, except that he is whisked off to paradise, where he finds his tree, his painting, his masterpiece, brought to life, and he finds himself equipped with the skills, knowledge, and materials to finish this masterpiece in its entirety, to complete it more than he ever could have completed it on Earth. The message here seems quite clear. One can, and perhaps should, seek perfection, but you also need to understand that it may not be possible in this lifetime. But Feanor, the maker of all makers, did achieve perfection. As John Ellison writes, "He had made something which he himself could not surpass. He could not strive after perfection any longer. He had achieved it. And all that creation could represent for him after that was mere pattern-making." Feanor's heart and soul was tied into these Silmarils, these instances of perfect creation, and once you had achieved perfection, what else was there to make? All he had then was to keep. He began losing complete grasp of what the Silmarils truly were, a collaboration between his craftsmanship and the light of the world. His work was merely the vessel that had allowed that light to shine, but to Feanor, even the light became his beautiful, precious heart. He became more and more bitter and jaded, excluding everyone from his life except for his father and his 7 sons, even forsaking the Valar. He closed tighter and tighter in on himself, and it would only take a nudge for that balance to be tipped into chaos. After years of imprisonment for his misdeeds, the Dark Lord Melkor was released from his bonds, and immediately he began spreading discord and rumors amongst the elves. He warned them that soon men were going to be born over in Middle-earth, and he suggested that mankind might usurp the place of privilege that the elves had always held. He warned them that the favor of the Valar was a fickle thing, and that by trusting them entirely, the elves were making a terrible mistake. Feanor hated Melkor and distrusted him completely, perhaps because he saw too much of himself in the Dark Lord. But the words did begin to get under his skin, agitating his already troubled mind. He began speaking out more and more vocally against the Valar. He started building his own stock of weapons and armor, and he urged his sons to begin taking up arms, ready to stand for themselves. Feanor's brother Fingolfin saw all of this and became very concerned, so he went before his father, Finwë, the king of the Noldor, and requested that he do something about it, get Feanor under control. Feanor took this as an outright attack and threatened Fingolfin with death, calling him spineless, eager to become a senseless thrall for the overpowered Valar. He accused Fingolfin of trying to turn their own father against him, and although he let Fingolfin leave alive, this was a serious overstep, and the Valar couldn't let this go by unspoken for. They brought Feanor before the doomsman of the Valar, still standing proud and unapologetic, where he was reminded that there was no place in existence where he could escape the rule of the Valar, not even in distant Middle-earth. The Valar banished him to a distant land for 12 years, telling him, "In that time take counsel with thyself, and remember who and what thou art." I think it's clear that the Valar realized what had happened to Feanor, the tragedy that had befallen him. Because he had become such a skilled creator, he had forgotten that he was not the creator. He had fallen into the same trap that Melkor had, seeking after the secret fire that was not his to possess. His pride, which had once been a driving force, pushing him towards creating beautiful and lovely things, had overflowed into open disobedience, a reckless fury with anyone that would try to impose reasonable bounds upon him. Feanor grudgingly departed for his exile, taking with him his father and the Silmarils, and it was there that Melkor came to him, telling him that everything that Feanor feared was true. The Valar had over-exercised their powers. They were trying to limit Feanor, to control him, and if Feanor ever truly wanted to be free, he would be best off following Melkor to a place beyond their power. Melkor warned Feanor that he must, above all else, keep the Silmarils safe. And if he really wanted them to be safe, Melkor had a really great place he could hide them. Of course, Feanor wasn't stupid, and he immediately realized what Melkor was up to, perhaps because he could see his own lust for power reflected in the Dark Lord's eyes, and he sent Melkor away, but the ideas that Melkor had placed in his mind remained, causing him to grow more and more possessive, jealous, and bitter. These gems were his life's work, and what was his life worth if he did not have them? Of course, not all of the elves were quite this bitter, and it was actually the brother that Feanor had threatened, Fingolfin, who decided to be the bigger elf and forgive his brother, calling him to join them for a celebration in Valinor. Feanor somewhat grudgingly came to hear him out, leaving behind his father to guard the Silmarils in his stronghold. Fingolfin held forth his hand, saying, "As I promised, I do now. I release thee, and remember no grievance." Then Feanor took his hand in silence, but Fingolfin said, "Half-brother in blood, full brother in heart will I be. Thou shalt lead, and I will follow. May no new grievance divide us." "I hear thee," said Feanor. "So be it." But they did not know the meaning that their words would bear. In that moment, screams erupted as Melkor returned with a vengeance, bringing with him the great spider monster Ungoliant to drain the trees of Valinor dry of their light and plunge the world into utter darkness. Melkor escaped, leaving behind only the shattered husks of the tree. Wails broke out across the land, and the Valar inspected the trees, and realized that the only way that they could bring them back to life was with light, the light of the Silmarils that Feanor had once taken from the trees. They implore with him to give up the Silmarils, to restore the world to the peace that it was meant to be in, but Feanor was too far gone. It seemed to him that he was beset in a ring of enemies, and the words of Melkor returned to him, saying that the Silmarils were not safe if the Valar would possess them. "And is he not Vala, as are they?" said his thought, "and does he not understand their hearts? Yea, a thief shall reveal thieves." Then he cried aloud, "This thing I will not do of free will. But if the Valar constrain me, then I shall know indeed that Melkor is of their kindred." So it is that Feanor made the choice that would damn him. Word soon arrived that Melkor had gone to Feanor's stronghold and killed his father and taken the Silmarils. One way or another, no matter what choice Feanor made, the Silmarils were not his anymore. And this is where fate comes into play. Fate and free will are very complex and somewhat contradictory ideas in Tolkien's Middle-earth. I actually did a whole video on this subject if you'd like to hear more about that. But the gist is that elves are bound by fate in a way that men are not. Men get to choose their own fate. They forge their own path forward. But the elves, in a way, do have their destinies written into history. When Feanor was asked to give up the Silmarils, he had the free choice to say yes or no. It seems that the results would have been the same either way, but later narration in the Silmarillion suggests that if he had said yes in this moment, although the Silmarils still would have been taken by Melkor, life may have gone very differently from him. His future ventures would not have been fighting against the Valar, but rather with them, having them on his side. But Feanor was shackled by greed. It forced his hand to the wrong choice, making him act on his selfish pride, refusing to help the Valar, and thus damning himself and his sons in the ages to come. But Feanor was never one to go gently into that dark night. He rallied up the rage of the Noldor. He proclaimed himself to be the new king after his father's death, and he named Melkor Morgoth, which means the Black Foe. But his ire was not with Morgoth alone, but with all of the Valar, who he saw as complicit in the Dark Lord's wickedness. Feanor would rather be unmoored and endangered, but free, rather than being safe, secure, and what he saw as weak. And above all else, Feanor wanted his Silmarils back. Then Feanor swore a terrible oath. His 7 sons leapt straight away to his side and took the self-same vow together, and red as blood shone their drawn swords in the glare of the torches. They swore an oath which none should break, and none should take by the name even of Iluvatar, calling the everlasting dark upon them if they kept it not. And Manwë they named in witness, and Varda, and the hallowed mountain of Taniquetil, vowing to pursue with vengeance and hatred to the ends of the world Vala, demon, elf, or man as yet unborn, or any creature great or small, good or evil, that time should bring forth unto the end of days, whoso should hold, or take, or keep a Silmaril from their possession. Many quailed to hear the dread words, for so sworn, good or evil, an oath may not be broken, and it shall pursue oath-keeper and oath-breaker to the world's end. So it was that Feanor and his sons swore an oath that anyone, good or evil, man or Vala, who tried to keep a Silmaril from them, they would hunt them down to the ends of the earth. Tolkien calls this vow blasphemous and terrible, as it completely upturned the rightful place of the elves in the world. Feanor and his sons swore on holy Manwë himself, on everything that was good in the world, that they would pursue their worst hatreds and jealousies to the very end of time. What could be more terrible than that? Feanor armed himself and his sons and all who would follow him, and they stormed off to the west, to the shore where some peaceful elves lived building ships, and they demanded that those elves give them ships so that they might sail across to Middle-earth and continue to pursue Morgoth. The elves refused, not wanting to help them in this terrible, thoughtless revolution, and Feanor snapped. They attacked the elves, slaughtering them, burning their beautiful city, and claiming their prize. And after witnessing this kinslaying, the Valar could no longer stand idly by and watch. Although it was not within the power of the Valar to stop Feanor in his course, this was something he had chosen of his own free will, they could banish him and his kin forevermore from Valinor, and tell him that he would never again have the help of the divine in any of his causes. So it was that the great everlasting doom of the Noldor was proclaimed upon them. Tears unnumbered ye shall shed, and the Valar will fence Valinor against you and shut you out, so that not even the echo of your lamentation shall pass over the mountains. On the house of Feanor the wrath of the Valar lieth from the west unto the uttermost east, and upon all that will follow them it shall be laid also. Their oath shall drive them, and yet betray them, and ever snatch away the very treasures that they have sworn to pursue. To evil end shall all things turn that they begin well, and by treason of kin unto kin, and the fear of treason, shall this come to pass. The dispossessed shall they be forever. It's important to note that this isn't a punishment, not really. It's a decree. This is something that the elves, particularly Feanor, have brought upon them themselves. It was their own vow, freely chosen and freely taken, that consigned them to this fate. But Feanor was far too lost to fear this. Then many quailed, but Feanor hardened his heart and said, "We have sworn, and not lightly. This oath we will keep. We are threatened with many evils, and treason not least, but one thing is not said, that we shall suffer from cowardice, from cravens or the fear of cravens. Therefore I say that we will go on, and this doom I add, The deeds that we shall do shall be the matter of song until the last days of Arda. At his very heart, Feanor is a warrior of the old world. He would rather make for a good story than for a long life. He prioritizes bravery above all else. His word is law to him, especially when he has been bound by an oath freely chosen. But as his story will show, an oath can be a very dangerous thing. Vows, promises, and oaths held a very particular power in the old days, especially in the stories of the old world that Tolkien adored so much. In the medieval period, the breaking of a vow was considered a sin on par with things like greed, lust, envy, adultery, and even manslaughter. Especially for the warrior, his word, his oath, his decree was of utmost importance, and we can really see this shine in the stories of the time, such as the Old English poem, The Battle of Maldon. This poem, which was composed sometime in the 10th or 11th century, is about the actual 10th century Battle of Maldon, in which the English, led by Byrhtnoth, attempted to fend off a Viking raid. Byrhtnoth was a warrior of the old world, and even though he was given the opportunity to pay off the Vikings and avoid a fight entirely, he stoutly refused. In fact, he allowed the Vikings to properly disembark and make their way to shore so that the battle would be on completely fair footing. But Byrhtnoth's excess of warrior pride, what the poem refers to with the Old English word offermod, is the thing that would get him and all of his army killed. The Vikings had far less scruples about breaking their vow, and although they had promised to wait until everything was set and ready to begin the battle, they took advantage and struck before Byrhtnoth and his men were prepared for the fight, and it was brutal. It was a complete bloodbath. But to his credit, Byrhtnoth went down fighting. He never broke his vow, and the battle was, in fact, worthy of quite a song. Some of Byrhtnoth's men fled the battle and were shamed by the narrator of the poem for their cowardice, but many of his men stayed, holding true to their words. Byrhtnoth's closest retainer was heard crying out, Hia shea de heandra, heore de senra, mor shea de mare, de ure mayen litlad. Tolkien translates this, Will shall be the sterner, heart the bolder, spirit the greater, as our strength lessens. Tolkien calls this battle cry the finest expression of the northern heroic spirit, and indeed the original poet of the Battle of Maldon poem speaks of the bravery of Byrhtnoth and his retainers in a praising tone. Yes, they were defeated, but God, what a fight it was! In these old stories, victory was often not the goal. In fact, in many of them, victory was a complete impossibility. But in the face of that impossibility, what marked a great warrior from a simple soldier was the fact that they fought anyway. True bravery meant facing up against loss, impossibility, and the inevitability of death, and holding to your oaths and fighting anyway, making your death something that will be the matter of song until the last days. And yet, through characters like Feanor, I think Tolkien is asking the question of, is this way of thinking right? Tolkien enjoyed the poem The Battle of Maldon, but in response to it, he wrote a short story called The Homecoming of Byrhtnoth, Bertholm's Son. In it, two men arrive on the eve following the battle, sorting through the masses of corpses to find their once great, and now fallen, lord. Grimly, these two outside observers note how very little all of this heroism seems to have served these great warriors. Certainly, they made a great song of their deaths, but now they're dead. Now they are nothing but a pile of corpses. They had a moment of greatness, but after that moment has passed, the sun keeps on rising, people keep on working, they keep on being born and dying, and now they're just corpses festering in the sun. In his essay on this poem, Tolkien writes, This northern heroic spirit is never quite pure. It is of gold and an alloy. Unalloyed, it would direct a man to endure even death unflinching when necessary. That is, when death may help the achievement of some object of will, or when life can only be purchased by denial of what one stands for. Yet this element of pride, in the form of the desire for honor and glory, in life and after death, tends to grow to become a chief motive, driving a man beyond the bleak heroic necessity to excess. But if we are already calling into question whether or not this model of bravery really works for most people's lives, should we not also question whether every oath should truly be unbreakable? Yes, the men that fled the Battle of Maldon in fear were cowards by name. They did break their word. But they also lived to see another day. They were able to return home, to support their communities in this troubled time. They were able to hold their children. They were able to become a part of history rather than just a flash in the pan. And even back in the medieval period, when the breaking of a vow was put on par with manslaughter, it was written, "If anyone is wrongfully constrained to promise either of these, to betray his lord or to render aid in an unlawful undertaking, then it is better to be false to the promise than to perform it." This thought is carried into The Lord of the Rings, voiced by Elrond, who witnessed all of the fallout of Feanor's unbroken oath. As the Fellowship forms, he warns them to be careful, to not make vows that they don't know that they can stand up to. "Faithless is he that says farewell when the road darkens," said Gimli. "Maybe," said Elrond, "but let him not vow to walk in the dark who has not seen the nightfall." "Yet sworn word may strengthen quaking heart," said Gimli. "Or break it," said Elrond. Oaths may be a very noble undertaking, a vow may strengthen the spirit, but true leadership and true wisdom means knowing when it is time to break one's word. The characters of The Lord of the Rings, who have long grown past the prideful, stunting overmode displayed by Bertnoth, are constantly breaking their oaths for the sake of the greater good. It may detract from their personal glory, but they understand that their personal glory means nothing in the face of the loss that can occur in outright war. Especially for a leader, knowing when it is time to break an oath is far more important than just being able to make them. Oaths can be a powerful thing. They bring people together onto a ship, buoying them up above the waves, taking individuals and sharing their strength to become an army, but one must always keep in mind that it only takes one person to sink that ship and take everyone down with them. And so it was with Feanor. He led his closest followers east across the sea to Middle-earth, allowing the rest of the Noldor elves to trail behind him, and he made a very unwise attack directly against Morgoth. Although victory seemed possible at first, he had underestimated Morgoth's cunning and was taken by Balrogs. His sons managed to drag him from the ruin of battle, still alive and breathing, but Feanor knew that his wounds were mortal. He cursed the name of Morgoth thrice, and laid it upon his sons to hold to their oath, and to avenge their father. Then he died, but he had neither burial nor tomb, for so fiery was his spirit that as it sped, his body fell to ash, and was borne away like smoke. And his likeness has never again appeared in Arda, neither has his spirit left the halls of Mandos. Thus ended the mightiest of the Noldor, of whose deeds came both their greatest renown and their most grievous woe. Compared to his long-lived brethren, Feanor's life was astonishingly short, a momentary spark, a blazing, searing, bright light that burnt itself out with the quickness of a match. But the remnants of his light would far outlive him, festering in embers that could never quite be stamped out. His sons held to their vow to their absolute detriment. Their deeds and misdeeds shape the ages of the story to come. A burning lust for the Silmarils, a desire to chase after them above all else, plagues almost every character in the Legendarium up until the Third Age in the events of The Lord of the Rings. Feanor's incredible fall from grace marked a steep decline in the quality of all of the elves. Conflict would forevermore be a part of the elves' story, and these stories became more and more tragic and grim, until at last in the tales of people like Turin Turambar, the world seems so bleak and hopeless compared to the peace that they had once had. Feanor marks a turning point, a pivot in the history of Middle-earth that they would never really recover from. In the end, only 2 of Feanor's sons are left, and still they find themselves bound by the oath that they had made with their father. One of the sons, Maedhros, holds true to the idea that they need to keep pursuing the Silmarils, no matter how evil or vile their actions had to be, until they met their own downfalls like all their brothers had. After all, the Valar had forsaken them, had placed doom upon them, so what else did they have to hope for except for the grim fulfillment of their oath? But the other son, Maglor, was beginning to have a change of heart. He was beginning to have doubts. He wondered that since they had made this vow on the Valar themselves, would it not be within the Valar's power to dissolve the oath, to try and do something better with their lives? Maedhros answered, "But how shall our voices reach to Iluvatar beyond the circles of the world? And by Iluvatar we swore in our madness, and called the everlasting darkness upon us if we kept not our word. Who shall release us?" "If none can release us," said Maglor, "then indeed the everlasting darkness shall be our lot, whether we keep our oath or break it. But less evil shall we do in the breaking." Yet he yielded at last to the will of Maedhros, and they took counsel together how they should lay hands on the Silmarils. Here we have yet another interplay of fate and free will, which once again comes to a tragic end. They have a choice here. It may be that the everlasting darkness will be their fate one way or the other, but Maglor recognizes that they will not do anything good for themselves in committing evil deeds. They will do less evil if they are willing to break their oath. But for so long this oath is all that they've had, and Maedhros refuses to abandon it, and Maglor refuses to abandon his brother. And so they commit yet more wickedness, yet more atrocities, and finally they lay their hands upon the Silmarils. But by now, their free will has taken them to a terrible place. They have become wicked, and as the Valar had once blessed the Silmarils to burn any of the wicked people that touch it, the Silmarils scorch the hands of Feanor's sons. In their despair, they destroy the Silmarils and destroy themselves. And so, the doom of the Noldor is fulfilled. Feanor is every quality that Tolkien admired, turned up to 11. He is the ultimate creator, the absolute perfectionist, the passionate maker of all things under the stars. He is someone that values free will over all. He seeks to make his own path, to make his own freedom, to pursue his own will over the will of the many. He is a hero of the old world, beautiful, blazing, and strong, the zenith of a series of tales, thousands of years in the telling. But when all of these qualities are present, but are pushed too far, when they become too much, it can become a tragedy. The creator with no humility or wisdom displaces himself in his own creator's plans. Heroic pride tips all too quickly into pitiful offer mode, an excess of chivalry and bravery for bravery's own sake, unalloyed by an understanding of the real world, of the true and real and bloody cost of war. But as always, Tolkien does not like to leave things purely tragic, and many of Feanor's worst characteristics are mended in The Lord of the Rings. He recreates the unrepentant creator in Sauron, and yet portrays Sauron as the villain who is beautifully defeated, while Tolkien provides us with examples of healthy and mindful makers. The hobbits demonstrate the power of will and freedom when it is not leveled for one's own personal gain, but for the gain of all. Characters like Elrond, Faramir, or Galadriel demonstrate a new model for heroism, one that values more than personal gain, one that cares about more than just making a good story. The catastrophic avalanche that first began with Feanor's plummet from grace is turned around into the most beautiful eucatastrophe. In one of Tolkien's favorite poems, The Tale of the Warrior King Beowulf, Beowulf is killed by Offermod, by an excess of pride, and his kingdom is left without a leader. And his soldier Wiglaf observes, Oft sheal eormonig anes willen rak e dreogan. By one man's will, many must woe endure. Feanor absolutely embodies this. Like any great hero of old, we should remember and sing and tell and retell his story so that we might remember what humanity is capable of, the heights of power and beauty and skill that we might achieve, and so that we might never forget the potent danger of one man's will and the woe endured by those that would senselessly follow him. In this video, I brushed on a lot of topics that I've covered more in depth in previous videos, such as this one and this one. So if you're interested in checking those videos out, I will be linking them in the description. And as always, my sources are also linked in the description, and I highly recommend that you check them out because there were a lot of great essays that helped me write this essay. Go ahead and let me know in the comments what your favorite part of Feanor's story is. There are so many dramatic moments in his particular tale that I love and I find so exciting, so let me know what you think in the comments. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and if you want to stick around, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. I make videos almost every week about The Lord of the Rings, the art of storytelling, and the other stuff that I find interesting. Thank you so much for joining me this week and every week, and I hope that you have a very happy, hobbity day.